The quiet man near the door. It was a rainy Monday morning in Los Angeles. People rushed into the small coffee shop on 6th and Main, dripping wet, huddling over their phones, desperate for warmth and caffeine. The bell above the door jingled every few seconds as the line stretched to the door. Behind the counter, 23-year-old Emily worked quickly, smiling through exhaustion. She had started her shift at 4:30 a.m., just like every morning for the past year. The regulars called her Sunshine, not because her life was easy, but because she somehow brought light to everyone else's. But this morning, something was different. A quiet figure stood just outside the door under the small awning, drenched from the chest down. He didn't come in. He didn't beg. He didn't even move. He just stood there looking in with tired eyes. His clothes were old, his beard grown, and his shoes soaked through. Most people didn't notice him. Some did, and turned their faces away. Emily noticed. While steaming milk for a cappuccino, she glanced out again. The man still hadn't moved. Her co-worker Jason nudged her. "You're too soft," he whispered, smirking. "You give one free muffin, and the whole block will line up." Emily didn't respond. She waited for the line to thin out, grabbed 2 fresh pastries and carefully placed them in a brown paper bag. Then she walked around the counter and stepped outside. "Hey," she said softly, holding out the bag. "It's warm inside if you want to sit. No charge." The man looked at her, and for a long second she saw something strange in his eyes. Pain, yes, but also something deeper. Something hidden. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough and dry as if he hadn't spoken in days. He took the bag with trembling hands and walked inside slowly. No one else paid attention. He sat at the far end near the bathroom and quietly ate, his eyes down the whole time. Emily went back to work, but something about him stayed with her. For the next few days, the man returned. Always early. Always silent. Always grateful. Emily would leave a bag of pastries on the edge of the counter before he came in. No one said anything. Not even Jason. Maybe it was the way the man moved. Never greedy, never demanding. Maybe it was the way he always cleaned the table after himself, neatly folding napkins, even placing the cup and plate together. One day, Emily sat with him on her break. "What's your name?" she asked. "John," he replied, avoiding eye contact. She nodded. "I'm Emily." He gave a small smile. "You've been kind to me, more than most." "You remind me of my dad," she said. "He always gave even when he had nothing left." John looked up then, and something flickered in his eyes again. But he said nothing. A week passed. Then another. And then, John didn't come. The seat stayed empty. Emily checked the door every few minutes that morning. By the second day, her heart began to feel heavy. She asked around, but no one had seen him. Not the guy from the gas station, not the street sweeper. No one. She walked 3 blocks after work, checking alleys and shelters. Nothing. When she returned to the cafe the next morning, there was a note on the counter. Folded. Clean. It said, "Thank you for seeing me. You reminded me that kindness still exists. I'll never forget it." Emily stared at the note for a long time. It was written on the back of a receipt from the cafe. He must have come in late when they were closing. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the note in her apron pocket. She didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness was about to change everything in her life, and not just hers. 3 days later, a black SUV pulled up outside the coffee shop. The driver came in first, wearing sunglasses and a black coat. He scanned the room, then a second man entered. The room fell quiet. Jason dropped a tray. A woman near the counter gasped. Emily turned and nearly lost her balance. It was Keanu Reeves. Not in costume, not with a film crew, just himself. His eyes scanned the room. Then they landed on her. He smiled. "Are you Emily?" he asked. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. He stepped forward and gently placed something on the counter. It was the same note, the one John had written, but this one had a signature on the back. Keanu Charles Reeves. Emily's legs gave out. She dropped to the stool behind her, stunned, tears forming before she could understand why. "I wanted to see you again," he said softly. But not as John. Everyone in the room was silent. Keanu sat at the stool across from her. "You treated me with kindness when you thought I had nothing, when I didn't look like someone who could offer you anything in return. You sat with me. You spoke to me like a person." She covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I've seen a lot in my life," he continued, "but I've never forgotten the people who were kind to me when no one else was watching." He paused. "I want to tell you something." Emily blinked, eyes wide. "You're about to have the busiest week of your life," he said, smiling gently. "And you're going to need help." She didn't understand. Not yet, but she would, because Keanu wasn't done, not even close. The crowd that never stopped the next morning. Emily's alarm buzzed at 3:45 a.m., same as always. But everything else was different. Her phone had over 200 unread messages, dozens of missed calls. Her Instagram had exploded with tags, news clips, blurry photos. And then it hit her, the video. Someone from the coffee shop had filmed yesterday's moment with Keanu Reeves and posted it. The caption read, "This barista gave pastries to a homeless man for 2 weeks. Turns out it was Keanu Reeves in disguise." Emily covered her mouth as she watched the clip. She saw herself handing the bag to Keanu, saw the tears, heard the soft, honest words from him, and then she saw the comments, thousands of them. "She's the kind of human we need." "I'm crying. This is why kindness matters." Keanu does it again, but this time it's her story that shook me. Outside, the sky was still dark, but she could already hear car doors slamming and voices. She peeked through the window. There was a line, stretching around the block, people with phones, cameras, news vans. She stood frozen, overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her boss. "Don't panic, I'm coming early. Stay calm. You're about to go viral in real life." By 5 a.m. the shop was packed, not with regulars but strangers, curious ones, reporters, bloggers, influencers. And quietly sitting in the corner in the same seat he always chose was Keanu. This time he wore a clean coat, trimmed beard, but still the same calm eyes. He waved to Emily as she rushed behind the counter. Everything felt surreal. "You okay?" he asked when she brought him tea. She smiled nervously. "I think so." "Good. Because I need to tell you something else." She blinked. "There's more?" He nodded. "A lot more." That evening, when the rush finally died down, Keanu stayed behind. The store had closed early. Emily sat across from him again, her hands still shaking from the whirlwind of the day. He reached into his coat and handed her a simple white envelope. Inside was a letter on heavy paper. "Dear Emily, I've partnered with a local foundation to support workers like you, those who go unnoticed while holding the world together with kindness. I'd like to help you achieve your dream, whether that's education, your own café, or anything else. You'll have the support you need. Keanu." She stared at the letter, not sure if she was dreaming. You want to help me open a café?" she whispered. Keanu nodded. "If that's your dream." Her voice cracked. "It was. I just never thought it could happen." "You never asked for anything," he said. "You just gave. People like you deserve to be lifted." She cried quietly then, covering her face. But there was something else in the letter, a small line at the bottom. "Also, please be ready at 9 a.m. Tomorrow, bring your best smile." The next morning, Keanu picked her up in a black SUV. She thought they were going somewhere simple, maybe a fundraiser, maybe a talk show. But instead, the car pulled up to a modest but charming building on a sunny street corner. The windows were covered with black fabric, hiding what was inside. Crew of workers stood nearby. So did a cameraman. And next to the door was a sign, "Grand Opening." Sunshine Cafe. Emily's knees nearly buckled. "What is this?" she whispered. Keanu turned to her. "This is your cafe." "But how?" "I bought the lease. Had the team fix it up last night. It's yours, Emily. Completely. Paid for, licensed, stocked. All we need is your touch." She couldn't stop. Crying. Reporters began arriving. People who had seen her story online. Even her old high school teacher showed up. Keanu guided her inside, where everything smelled like new paint, fresh bread, and hope. A chalkboard sign stood behind the counter. It read, "Kindness is free, the rest is just coffee." Emily walked behind the counter. It felt surreal. People began filing in. The first order wasn't coffee, it was a little boy with his mom. "Hi," he said, holding $1. "My mom said you're the kindest lady in the world. Can I get a chocolate chip cookie?" Emily smiled through her tears. "It's on the house," she said softly, handing him 2. Outside, the news trucks lined up again, not for gossip, not for scandal, but for a barista who gave a man a bag of pastries and received a future in return. And Keanu wasn't done. He had one more surprise. He stood beside her as they watched the growing crowd and whispered, "I'm only here to open the door. You're the one who's going to change lives from now on." She looked at him, overwhelmed. "Why me?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Because you didn't wait for someone to tell you to care. You just did. And that was the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have imagined. The kindness effect. The next few days felt like something from a movie. Emily's cafe, Sunshine Cafe, had lines wrapping around the block by 8 a.m. every day. Reporters came from across the country. Talk show invites poured in. She even had to hire 2 more staff just to keep up with orders, and Keanu helped her interview them personally. But beyond the buzz and the headlines, something deeper was happening. People weren't just coming for the coffee. They were coming because they believed in something again. It started small. One man paid for his coffee and left an extra $20 saying, "For the next person who looks like they're having a hard day." Later, a woman donated 10 fresh loaves of bread from her bakery and wrote on a card, "Your story helped me forgive someone I hadn't spoken to in years." By the end of the week, a big box sat by the door with a sign that said, "Free if you're hungry, no questions asked." Emily didn't write that sign. A customer did, but she left it there and filled it every morning. Keanu kept showing up, not as a celebrity, not as a guest, just as a man in a gray hoodie who helped mop the floors, fill the napkin holders, and sometimes even sat by the door handing out coffee to strangers. "I like this place," he said. "Reminds me of who we're supposed to be." One morning, as they sipped tea before opening, Emily finally asked the question that had been on her mind since the beginning. "Why did you pretend to be homeless?" Keanu looked down at his cup for a long time before answering. "I wasn't pretending," he said quietly. "Not entirely." Emily's eyebrows pulled together. "What do you mean?" "I needed to disappear," he said. "For a while. Too many people. Too many expectations. I started to lose who I was, so I went out with nothing. Just to remember." He looked up, eyes sincere. "The way people treated me, most of them looked right through me. But not you. You made me feel human again." Emily didn't know what to say. "So I came back," he added, "not to be found, but to say thank you." She reached over and placed her hand on his. "You don't owe me anything, Keanu." He smiled. "Maybe not, but I owe it to the world to tell them about people like you." Soon, Sunshine Cafe wasn't just a place for coffee. It became a movement. Keanu started a small foundation in Emily's name. They called it Project Sunshine. Its mission was simple: support and spotlight everyday heroes who helped others. When no one was watching, they received thousands of messages, letters from teachers, janitors, drivers, nurses, stories of small, unnoticed kindnesses. And each week, Emily would pick one and write a handwritten reply, sometimes with a small donation enclosed, sometimes with just words of encouragement. One day, a teenage boy walked in. His clothes were dirty, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. The cafe was packed, but Emily noticed him the moment he stepped through the door. He stood near the corner, unsure if he was allowed to be there. Emily grabbed a hot sandwich and a cup of cocoa, walked straight to him. "You good?" she asked. He looked up with tired eyes. "Are you the girl from the Keanu video?" "Depends," she smiled. "You hungry?" He nodded. "Haven't eaten since yesterday." She handed him the food and waved him to sit. "You eat? No strings." The boy sat. He ate in silence. And when he was done, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn notebook. "I draw," he said. "Not very good. But this is yours." Emily flipped through it. The pages were filled with sketches of cafes, people laughing, a woman behind a counter smiling at a man in rags, her eyes filled with tears. "What's your name?" she asked. "Eli," he whispered. She stood, walked to the back and returned, with a clean apron. "Eli, how do you feel about working part-time?" His eyes widened. "For real? Only if you show me how to draw like this." He laughed. It was the first time she'd seen him smile. Keanu watched the moment from a table, near the window, quietly sipping his tea. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He just smiled. But not everyone was happy. One morning, Emily walked in to find graffiti on the cafe window. Someone had written, "Fake kindness for clicks." Jason, now promoted to cafe manager, wanted to call the police. Emily said no. Instead, she grabbed a bucket, some soap, and cleaned it herself. When the local paper asked her about it later that day, she simply said, "Not everyone will understand. But we keep being kind anyway." Keanu brought her a fresh bouquet of sunflowers that afternoon. "They don't grow in anger," he said, "only in light." She nodded. "Then we keep growing." That night, the cafe was quiet. As she locked the door, Keanu stayed behind. They sat on the curb, side by side, watching the city lights. "You know," he said. "I've acted in over 70 films, done hundreds of interviews, walked red carpets all over the world." He looked at her. "But I've never felt more real than I did the day you gave me a paper bag with 2 pastries." Emily smiled, her voice soft. "And I've never felt more seen than when you walked in and remembered my name." They sat in silence for a while, and in that stillness they both realized something. It wasn't just about the cafe, or the moment, or even the story that went viral. It was about something bigger, something deeper. Kindness had ripple effects, and this was just the beginning. The storm and the seed, the sky was gray the next morning. Heavy clouds hung over the city like a warning. The air felt different, dense, like something was about to change. Inside Sunshine Cafe, the lights were warm, and the smell of cinnamon muffins filled the air. Laughter echoed as regulars shared stories and new customers wandered in, drawn by word of mouth more than social media now. The buzz had shifted from fame to feeling, but Emily sensed it before anyone else. Something was coming. Keanu had been quiet lately. He still came in, still helped, but his smiles were softer, more distant, as if something inside him was pulling away. That morning, she finally asked, "What's wrong?" Keanu looked up from the dishwasher, towel in hand. "I have to leave soon." The words hit her like cold rain. "Leave?" "Just for a while," he said. "I signed on to a project overseas, a long one." Emily tried to smile, but it cracked at the edges. "You didn't want to tell me?" "I didn't want to ruin this moment," he said gently. "But I didn't want to disappear again either." She nodded slowly. "How long will you be gone?" "Maybe 6 months." Silence fell between them. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. "You built this place," he said. "You don't need me anymore." Emily's voice was quiet. It wasn't about need. It was about knowing someone believed. Later that day, the rain came. Not just drizzle, a real downpour. Fast, loud, chaotic. The streets flooded, power lines flickered, and around 4 p.m., the cafe went dark. Total blackout. People inside panicked. A child cried. Someone dropped their coffee. But Emily didn't freeze. She grabbed her phone flashlight, stood on a chair, and said, "We have candles. We have muffins. We're going to be okay." Within minutes, the space transformed. Tables were pushed together. Tea lights lit up the corners. The smell of warm bread made everything feel safe. And Keanu played soft guitar from a stool by the window, filling the room with calm. In the flickering light, people opened up. One man shared he had lost his job the day before. A woman admitted she hadn't spoken to her sister in years. Eli, the teenage boy with the notebook, stood up and read a poem he wrote about second chances. People cried. People laughed. People leaned into each other. And Emily realized something beautiful. Sunshine Cafe wasn't just surviving the storm. It was becoming a shelter. When the lights came back, no one cheered. They just smiled. Warm, quiet smiles. Keanu walked to Emily and handed her the guitar. "Your turn," he said. She laughed. "I can't play." "Then fake it," he smiled. "Like I did the first time." So she strummed a few soft notes. Off-key. Awkward. Perfect. And everyone clapped anyway. The next morning, a letter arrived, addressed to Emily. It was from a woman named Maria, an old lady in Texas who had watched the cafe video and shared it, with her entire church. Inside the envelope was $20 and a note. "I lost my son 2 years ago. He used to give his lunch to a kid at school who never had food. When I saw you and Keanu, I felt my son's spirit again. I don't have much, but I want to help keep the kindness going." Emily folded the letter gently and placed it in a small box under the counter, a box she had started for moments like this. She called it the seed box. Inside were letters, drawings, poems, photos, all from strangers who had been touched by something as simple as a free pastry. She read them when the days felt heavy, and they reminded her that every act of kindness planted something. On Keanu's last day before leaving for his film shoot, he arrived early. The cafe was quiet. He brought 2 cups of tea, sat at their usual corner table, and handed her a small, hand-wrapped package. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, but engraved with 6 words: "See the unseen. Feed the soul." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You remembered what I said?" She whispered. "Every word," he replied. "And Emily, one day, someone will walk through that door who feels invisible, just like I did, and you'll remind them they're not." He stood, pulling on his coat. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. Never stop seeing people." She nodded, her voice caught in her throat. They hugged. The kind of hug that said more than words ever could. Then he left. The door closed softly behind him, and Sunshine Cafe stood still for a moment. But only for a moment, because a man walked in right after, wearing a coat too thin for the cold and shoes full of holes. He stood awkwardly, unsure. Emily stepped forward with a smile, just like before. "Hi there," she said. "Can I get you something warm?" The man blinked, surprised. "I don't have any money." "Lucky for you," she said gently. "We serve kindness first, coffee second." And just like that, the cafe breathed again. The storm had passed, but the seed was growing. The man. With the worn book 3 weeks passed since Keanu left, Emily kept busy. Too busy. Sunrise to sunset. Orders, inventory, smiles, hugs. She answered emails from people all over the world. She was invited to events, podcasts, even a TV segment, but she declined most of them. Not because she didn't appreciate it, but because she had work to do. Real work. Kindness had to stay grounded, not famous, not flashy. She focused on keeping Sunshine Cafe what it had always been. Real, warm, and human. But some nights when the cafe was quiet and the candles burned low, she missed him. Not the actor. Not the spotlight. Just the man who sat near the back drinking tea with gentle eyes and patient silence. Still, she kept her promise. She saw people. She made it a mission to learn the name of every customer who walked in more than twice. She remembered allergies, birthdays, Even the woman who always wore blue but never ordered the same drink twice. And every week, news stories found their way to her. It was a rainy Wednesday when the next story walked in. A man, maybe late 60s, with gray hair tucked under a beanie, walked through the door holding an old leather-bound book. His clothes were clean but faded, his posture tired. He stood at the counter without looking up, flipping through the worn pages. "Can I help you?" Emily asked. "Just coffee," he mumbled. Black. Small. His voice cracked a little, like it had forgotten how to speak softly. She poured the coffee, added a muffin to the tray without charge, and handed it over. He hesitated. "I didn't ask for the muffin." "It's a good day for one," she said. He looked at her then, and something shifted in his eyes. Not surprise, not pride, just a flicker of warmth. He sat by the window and opened his book again. That night, when the cafe closed, Emily found a note left on the table beside his empty cup. "I lost my wife last winter. I come here now because this place feels like her. Gentle, giving, kind. Thank you." She folded the note and added it to the seed box. The man came back the next day and the day after that, always with the same book. Emily finally asked, "What's the book?" He looked down and smiled for the first time. "It's her journal. She used to write poetry. After she passed, I started reading one a day. Helps me feel close to her." He pulled out a page and slid it across the table. Emily read the poem slowly. It was short but full of soul. "Some lights flicker when storms draw near, but kindness holds like fire, clear a silent hand. A look, a tear. It's love that keeps us standing here." She blinked hard, trying not to cry. "Her name was Lila," he said. "She believed in people, like you do." Emily nodded. "Then she'd be proud of you for carrying her words." He looked away, his voice low. "Some days I don't know if I can." She reached over and gently touched his hand. "Then we carry them with you." A few days later, someone left an anonymous donation at the cafe. A small box with old paperbacks, bookmarks, and a note. "For those who sit alone. Stories heal." Emily placed them on a shelf near the back, a reading corner. Quiet. Soft lit. She named it Lila's Nook. Soon people started leaving their own books, adding notes in the margins, writing letters tucked between pages. The cafe was becoming a library of the heart, and the man with the worn book, whose real name was Michael, became its quiet guardian. But just as things seemed perfect again, life delivered another twist. One morning, a woman walked in, clearly in a rush. Sunglasses, suit, tablet in hand. She ordered quickly, eyes on her screen. Emily handed her the coffee. "Long day?" The woman looked up briefly. "You have no idea." Emily smiled. "We survive them better with kindness." The woman didn't respond, just turned and walked out. But 20 minutes later, she came back with tears in her eyes. She stood at the counter and said, "Can I talk to you?" Emily nodded. They sat near the back. The woman introduced herself as Claire. She was a senior producer for a major media company. She had seen the cafe online months ago but ignored it, until today. "This morning, my daughter left a note on my desk," Claire said. She wrote, "I hope you smile today like the lady who gave muffins to the movie man." She drew a picture of you. I don't even know how she found the video. Emily listened, quiet. "I realized," Claire continued, "that I haven't smiled in months, not really. I don't even know who I am anymore." She looked up. "Can I volunteer here? Just for a day or two. I need to remember who I used to be." Emily didn't hesitate. "You can start tomorrow." The next morning, Claire showed up at 6 a.m., hair tied back, no makeup, wiping tables and pouring coffee. She cried twice that day, but smiled 10 times more. By the end of the week, she quit her job and started a podcast called The Kindness Hour, interviewing people with ordinary stories of extraordinary heart. Her first guest? Michael. She titled the episode, "The Man Who Read Love Out Loud." On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Emily sat alone in the cafe. She opened her journal, something she hadn't done since Keanu left, and began to write. The world still surprises me. People still break. And yet something beautiful always grows in the cracks. Every stranger who walks through that door carries a seed, and somehow they leave a little lighter. She closed the book, looked around, and whispered, "You were right, Keanu. Kindness isn't loud, but it echoes." Just then, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Look outside." She stepped to the window, and there, standing on the sidewalk in the soft sunset glow, was Keanu smiling, back early, and not alone. Behind him stood someone she didn't recognize, an older woman with a cane, nervous but glowing. Keanu waved. Emily opened the door. He stepped in and said softly, "I met someone who reminded me of you." The sheer woman with the cane held the door open as Keanu stepped inside, followed by the older woman. The street behind them was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Soft clouds moved slow overhead. The moment felt still, like something sacred had just entered. Emily's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just the surprise of seeing Keanu again. It was the look in his eyes. Something deeper. Something meaningful. "You came back," she whispered. Keanu smiled. "I said 6 months. I made it back in 5. Emily wiped a tear and hugged him. Tight. No words. Just warmth. He pulled back and gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Mrs. Abigail Wu," he said. "I met her while filming in Kyoto. She reminded me of someone I couldn't forget." Abigail nodded gently, her hands wrapped around the top of her cane. Her face was lined with years of sorrow and joy, her eyes soft and searching. Emily stepped forward. "Welcome. Please sit." They took a quiet corner table, the same spot where Keanu once sat as John. As they sipped tea and watched the soft movement of the cafe, Keanu explained, "She used to run a small bookshop, gave books away to children who couldn't afford them. Never told anyone. Just did it. Year after year." Abigail chuckled. "I didn't do anything grand." Keanu shook his head. "You gave when no one was watching. That's always grand." Emily leaned in. "And what happened to the shop?" Abigail looked down. "Closed during the pandemic. Couldn't keep it up. But the part that hurt most wasn't losing the building. It was losing the feeling. The sound of young voices choosing stories. The thank you notes. The small, quiet magic." Emily reached across the table and gently touched Abigail's hand. "We've built something like that here," she said. "And maybe you can build it again." Abigail looked up, surprised. "How?" Keanu smiled. "I told you she'd say that." A few weeks later, Sunshine Cafe had a new corner. A bookshelf lined the back wall, painted with flowers and stars. Under a hanging sign that read, "Abigail's Shelf, free books for growing hearts," there were cushions and fairy lights. Kids came after school. Old men came to donate stories. Even Michael, with his worn poetry journal, donated a few pieces from his late wife's collection. Abigail came every morning. Cane in hand, smile on her face, reading to children, listening to teens, sipping tea with strangers. Keanu watched it all, staying mostly quiet. But his heart was full. Emily sat beside him one evening as they watched the crowd. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "This is more than I imagined. You started it." "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "You did. I just followed the light." She smiled. "So what now?" He looked at her. "I think it's time to tell the full story." "Our story?" "Not just ours. The people here, the kindness, the notes, the poems, the meals, everything. Let's show the world that compassion isn't rare, it's just hidden." They made a documentary, but it wasn't about Keanu. It was about Sunshine Cafe. The people, the letters, the stories that had been left behind. They filmed Michael reading his wife's poetry, Eli showing his art, Claire explaining how she found herself again through wiping tables and listening. They interviewed strangers who had walked in broken and left a little more whole. And at the very end of the film, the final clip showed the very first moment, when Emily walked outside with a paper bag and handed it to a man no one else had seen. The screen faded to black with the words, "One small act of kindness can echo across the world." The film released quietly on a streaming site. No marketing. No promotions. But within days, millions had seen it, and something incredible happened. Other cafes around the world started seed boxes of their own. Bookshops added Abigail shelves, podcasts popped up about everyday kindness, and letters poured in again. This time, from every continent. On the anniversary of that first rainy day, Sunshine Cafe held a celebration, not of fame, not of success, but of people. Michael read a new poem he had written just for that day. Eli painted a mural on the outside wall of the cafe, showing Emily handing the bag to Keanu, with beams of light flowing from it into dozens of stories around the world. Abigail cried as children gave her handmade bookmarks with her name written in every color, and Emily stood behind the counter, taking it all in. Keanu stepped beside her and whispered, "How does it feel?" She smiled. Like a miracle grew out of a muffin. He laughed gently. "A miracle made of kindness." "Thank you," she said. "You never had to," he replied. "You just gave." And the world gave back. That night, as the crowd thinned and the cafe grew quiet again, Emily lit a single candle and sat alone by the window. She opened her journal and wrote one final entry. "I didn't change the world. I just fed someone who looked hungry. And maybe that's enough, maybe that's how it always starts." Then she closed the book, and outside the stars began to shine.